This episode is brought to you by Groove Washer, the best record cleaners and protective sleeves for your vinyl collection. Ask for the Groove Washer from your local shop or go to groovewasher.com. Discount code VinylGuide10. And now, on with the show.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 348 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And wow, we've got a phenomenal guest today. DJ, producer, turntablist, and of course, fellow record collector, Cut Chemist. Now, Cut Chemist has a long, illustrious career of bending the rules of records, exploring crates around the world, twisting music, and innovating around the physics of turntables and vinyl records. To try to describe what he does is impossible. However, if you're unfamiliar with the exploits of Cut Chemist, give him a Google, check out some of the videos. It's absolutely amazing what he does with a turntable and a handful of records. Now, I want to recommend everyone check out his pages, cutchemist.com, as well as cutchemist.bandcamp.com, where you can follow him and find many releases, as well as a Stable Sound Club subscription, which gives you access to Cut Chemist megamixes, unreleased music, behind-the-scenes videos, cassette uploads, first access to limited merch from the vault, and much more. Just click the follow button at cutchemist.bandcamp.com. And while we're on the subject of subscriptions, there is an extended, commercial-free, and high-resolution version of this interview available only to patrons of the podcast, which can be obtained at patreon.com/vinylguide. Much more of this interview is up there, and we always give out extras. Experience the Vinyl Guide in extended form, longer interviews, higher resolution, commercial-free versions, and much earlier access than the public podcast feeds. Support us for $5 or $10 a month or more, whatever works. That's patreon.com/vinylguide. And finally, we now have nearly 350 episodes of the Vinyl Guide podcast, which are accessible anytime by following us in your podcast app. Interviews with the likes of audiophile and vinyl ambassador Michael Fremer, episode 347 of the Vinyl Guide, Sendog of Cypress Hill, episode 342, TMOQ, Trademark of Quality Bootleg Records, episode 299, Texas gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke talking punk rock on episode 238 of the Vinyl Guide, jazz great Ron Carter, episode 224, DJ producer composer Amon Tobin, episode 227, and hundreds more. Subscribe to the Vinyl Guide in your podcast app, scroll, and enjoy. And with that, let's get into our conversation with the astounding turntablist himself, Mr. Cut Chemist. Cut, I've always wanted to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time. This show is all about record collecting, crate digging adventures, and things like that, of which I'm sure you are very familiar. You wrote the book on it, quite honestly. Interestingly enough, I've been seeing some recent social media posts you've had on what looks to be like this warehouse of records. And I don't know if this is your collection. I don't want to break any confidences if there's some exclusivity or secrets around it, but it warmed my heart knowing that places like that still exists, and a lot of those records that you're pulling out of there are still somewhere out in the wild.
Yeah, I can talk to you about it. When I was in Minneapolis. You're talking about the most recent one?
Yeah, literally today and yesterday.
Yeah, so there was a store, a great record store in Minneapolis called Let It Be. And I used to go there, whenever I would do a Minneapolis stop with J5. And great store. I would go into the basement and pull all kinds of weird stuff. Anyway, they had closed for a long time. And the guy that ran the shop, named Ryan, now just operates out of a warehouse in St. Paul. And so I knew I was going to have a day off in Minneapolis before the show. And so I reached out to him and I said, is it possible to come by the warehouse and poke around? And he was very gracious and let me do it. And it was massive. I mean, I was finding mint blue notes, from the 60s to he bought 5 semi trucks worth of dance music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So, I mean, it's like something for everybody. 45s, folk stuff, soul stuff, sealed records, it was press photos.
Oh.
So it was the kind of thing where 2 days didn't really scratch the surface.
I just saw on the news that every flight to Minneapolis is now sold out. So, do you know of many other places like that? I mean, that just seems to be this huge honey hole heaven, right? But are there others around like that?
Oh, I'm sure. A lot of stores probably don't exist anymore, but the stock might. And so wherever that stock is, whether the store owner still operates on Discogs or, sells online or whatever, because it's really, I don't know how cost effective it is these days to actually rent a space to sell out of when you can just do it out of your house. I mean, I do that.
Mm-hmm.
I sell, online, and I don't have to pay rent. So there's no overhead really, other than the commission that you pay the platform.
Is there anything out there you're still kind of looking for?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. There's always stuff, whether it's hip hop LPs. Like I want to fill the holes of my rap LP collection, stuff that I wasn't really focused on completing back in the 90s, just for whatever reason. I was getting so many things that I just enjoyed what I got, but I never went out and like tried to complete the whole narrative of hip hop LPs. There was that like dead zone in the 90s where they weren't printing so many albums on vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hard to find. They've become coveted. Things like what's a good example? The Power Roll record LP on Interscope. That's pretty tough to get. Now that being said, in the age of Discogs, things have gotten less rare because all the copies seem to be when it wasn't at arm's length, or at arm's reach. It seemed rare, but now that the entire world database is kind of at your fingertips, it's like, oh no, there's 24 copies available. So
if enough money, you can complete the collection. Do you find that fun as it used to be, or what's your opinion on kind of the change between
as you get older and you realize your time on Earth is a lot shorter? It's fun as hell. To know that I can be like, why wait to find it in the wild when I could, if I really want it, just fucking buy it right now. It's right there. It would be on my doorstep in 3 days.
Mm-hmm. How many new records do you introduce into your collection every week?
Not that many. I don't buy in quantity really, unless, I'm at a warehouse. But like 2 or 3, 4, I focus on quality at this point rather than quantity. I used to buy a bunch of records and cull through it and cherry pick, through the load. But now I'm like, very singular, like, oh, I want that record. I'll pay extra to have that one record rather than buy a bunch of chud, and then go, oh, this one's great. This one's great. You get like 5 records out of like 50 that you really cherish, and the rest you just kind of chuck in storage and maybe sell later down the line.
Right.
This way I know I'm buying things that I'm going to keep and cherish and listen to.
Condition of records is always, important, but is it as important when you're building your collection at this point? Are you willing to pay a premium for something that's mint versus something that may not be?
Yeah, probably like 3 times the price.
Yeah.
Or 4, Yeah, I think listening to albums without any interruption of like, noise and pops and stuff is important to me at this point. Before I used to use records as tools to play out before Serato. So I wasn't really, fussed with VG copies because they were for playing out. But now it's for home listening enjoyment. And so I want them to be clean. And also, looking at them as an investment, because I'm not going to be buried with these things. So hopefully I can turn around and sell those at the, beyond the premium that I bought them for, and they'll appreciate in value. But I think more likely to do that if they're mint
Right.
than VG. Now, if you get VG copies, then you have to factor in provenance, like, well, who beat these things up and where were they beat up? Under what circumstance and context? Like if you're buying, you got the Cool Herc Christie's auction up right now. You kind of don't want Cool Herc's records to be mint if you're buying Cool Herc's records. You want the battle scars on those from Sedgwick, like this scratch right here happened in 1974 in the rec room at Sedgwick. That's a different story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would imagine at some point, hopefully far in the future, when your records pass on, there'll be a very similar kind of provenance. This was in Cut Chemist collection.
Sure. And if that does happen, it will be well organized as to which ones were part of my play crate, which ones were J5, like showpieces, that we would play. Like, so I have my storage kind of organized like that, like records throughout the 90s that are routine records. Brain Freeze 45s, they're over here. Product placement over here. I never disseminated those sets into the collection. I just kind of kept them together.
Oh, okay. So even by year. So this is the crate from 2003. This is the crate.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because I never knew if I was going to have to reintroduce that into a set later. So I never wanted to break it up because I would forget what records I used. And they would even have the stickers on them and everything still.
Got it. Okay. Watching you perform, I mean, to me, it's like a high wire act, and it's...
Right, that's what I call it a tightrope act. That's funny.
Yeah, well, it is. It's like, is he going to do it? Oh my God. At any moment, one small misstep and can collapse what you've spent, minutes, 10, 20 minutes building up. Is there a lot of pressure when putting together a set, or is it right? By this time you just flow on with it. It's not a problem at all.
Depends on what the occasion is. If there's a performance where, let's see, all right, so let me give you an example. I had to open up for Lonnie Liston Smith. It was just before the pandemic. And I wanted to do something special because it was, Lonnie Liston Smith. And it was for an audience that really appreciated music, obviously. I mean, if you're going to go see an artist like that, chances are you're a fan of music. So I wanted to put on something that honored the big deal that it was. And so I did a loop pedal routine, kind of like Sound of the Police, but it was a jazz oriented set. And it was February, so it was Dilla month. All the stars were aligned for it. So I wanted to do something special. And so I did this all vinyl, all original copy vinyl, one turntable loop pedal set. And, this show was presented by Adrian Young and Ali Shaheed Muhammad. So, there was definitely some Tribe Called Quest stuff representing in there, like, reverse engineering things from the original records, looping them and stacking them and rebuilding the tracks. I'll do stuff like that. And then other times when it's, like I'll go out with Charlie Tuna, I'll warm up the crowd with just kind of an improvised Serato hip hop classic set. Nothing really rehearsed. I like to be able to stay on my toes when it comes to improv and rehearse and rehearse shows.
Right.
So if I have to do something really rehearsed, I can do that. If I have to do something on the fly and improv, I can do that. I think it's important to hold both as a performer.
How much is pre-planned and how much is in the moment?
I'd say probably about 60-40 in favor of rehearsed. 40%. I think it's important no matter how rehearsed you are, you can't control the universe. So it's going to throw you a curveball and you have to know how to, manipulate the situation the best you can, knowing the odds are against you. So with that anything can happen kind of mindset, you have to allow for at least 10% of your energy to be switched over to improv mode, when you're performing an intensely rehearsed set. When Shadow and I do stuff, it's probably the most rehearsed routines, I've ever been a part of. But still, if a needle snaps, a turntable dies, like those things can happen and you have to be ready, and not just like stop everything and, go, okay, well, the show can't go on because of this. You try to play through as best you can. And there's been some situations where, I've covered up pretty good. I feel pretty good about those moments. So,
what's one of those memories you had? Those holy shit moments where it almost wakes you up at night when you think about that.
Well, I'll tell you the really probably the biggest oh shit moment was when my computer died in the middle of a set opening up for Shakira in Europe at a hockey stadium. The thing is with records and needle skips, I can get through that and not really flinch. I mean, at this point, I can cover up a needle skip. I can make it work. I can make a mistake work to my advantage to where it would probably have been better than if it went through with, like the rehearsed version of it. Mm-hmm. But when a computer glitches or fucks up, I'm a deer in the headlights because I don't speak computer. I'm a generation, I'm analog. So when a computer is like, yeah, fuck you, I'm not going to work today, I just kind of go, all right, I don't even know what to do here. I don't know how to talk sweet to it. I don't know how to, try to convince it, like, let's get through this together. None of that. But I don't, so I can't remember what the circumstance was. It was early Serato. It was like 2006-ish, early 2007. So the tech wasn't, it was kind of still a little bit fresh. And certainly fresh for me. I think it was the first tour I did that I used it. And I did something to where I ended up saving the show somehow on the fly. But it was like, I was nervous as hell. Because, I mean, you're in front of 30,000 people. And they already hate you anyway because you're not Shakira. So, yeah, but I made it work. I don't know how. Don't ask me how. I can't. I think I blocked it out of my mind. Like, yeah, that let's just never... let's not even learn from that situation. Let's just deny it.
It's like a pilot having the whole cockpit power go out.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like when the engines on your 737 go out. How do you coast? Like, you gotta, use the wind and the wings to just coast on down. I don't know how it happened, but I landed the plane.
Excellent. Yeah. So when you travel, how many records do you travel with?
None. I won't do like fly gigs just because of the nature of carry on. It's unless it's a specific vinyl party, where they want you to play that medium, which is very, very few and far between now. Mm-hmm. I just go with Serato and my 2 Serato discs and phase. Sometimes I won't even play the Serato disc. I'll use phase, the phase sticks.
Okay, so very light traveling then.
Got to. I mean, because if when you're doing these little these festivals like in the middle of nowhere and God knows, like upstate New York or Arkansas or something, you don't want to be lugging around vinyl. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's the medium of the generation today is definitely not that. So yeah, I don't feel the need to bring it.
Have you ever broken an important record or had your DJ bag lost or stolen before a gig?
Just happened.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's hot out here right now, and I was like, you know what? Now would be a good time to get back into the de-warping phase of my life, which I haven't done in a long time. And I got pretty successful at it using glass outside. And I had a $600 record that I just bought. And it was like, it was it was playable. It was fine. It just could be a little bit flatter. So I was like, all right, let me try it. And I guess I didn't account for how much hotter it is now than it used to be, because the time that I set it out for, it just, which wasn't long at all, completely ruined the record. I mean, it's not playable at all. It's the vinyl melted.
Oh.
So that was a bummer. That was a real bummer. I was like, fuck, that's a $600 lesson.
Do you mind sharing what record that was?
Yeah, I'm not going to share it because I got to get another one,
you
know? And when I get another one, I'll tell you.
Okay. All right. You don't want it to become a $700 record.
It probably will be. It'll probably be. I mean, you know, post-pandemic prices are stupid. Everything's like 4 times the price and rising.
Do you think that's sustainable?
Depends on who gets into buying vinyl. I mean, if Elon Musk gets into it, we're fucked, you know, because he's just going to fuck up the grading curve even more.
See, I think there's a lot of collectors out there that are, you know, getting older and older. I'll put us in that bucket, but there's people who are got another 10, 20 years on us. And once they start moving on to a different plane of existence, their collections, I think, are going to start flooding the market. You're going to start seeing those, you know, those records that are right now, you know, $500 and $600. All of a sudden, there's going to be 7 or 8 of them available. Plus, you add in the warehouses like in Minneapolis and probably a handful somewhere else. I don't know. I can't help but think we're kind of on the cusp of this vinyl boom that's going to, I won't say, you know, go back down to zero or early 2000s prices, but I think we're in for a big dip.
We've said that for years, and it hasn't happened. You know, these people that have collected records have let their stuff go back into the world, and it had no effect. It still went up. I feel like records that are unobtainable, that become obtainable for a second. Like if you see a copy that is never been sold and then one is out there, like one becomes available, it actually inflates the price because now people know that it's gettable and they become obsessed with getting it. And so the price shoots up. It doesn't go down because one became available all of a sudden. It actually the opposite. Now, if a box shows up,
mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, what's the best example for that? Darling Dears, I guess. The Darling Dears 45. Somebody in Australia bought, I guess, what's this stock from the studio that made it or something. I can't remember. And so $1,000 45 became, I think he was like letting them go at like $100 or $200 a piece or something like that. Really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And they all went like that. And it's definitely back up to $1,000 now, you know. So once they all find their homes, you know, I don't think it's going to dip so much because remember, they're still printing money. They're not printing these records. So I think a lot of people use that rationale when they're buying these things. They're like, well, fuck it. I'll pay an extra $500 to get a copy because I don't want to wait anymore. And then the new Discogs price list is like, oh shit, it's $500 more than it was 2 years ago. It seems to be the trend.
What's the most you've ever paid for a record?
I can't remember. I think probably like the 2000 range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which one? Do you mind sharing?
It was an acetate, but I'll just keep it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen you spin with a lot of test pressings, white label LPs. You know, I think there's more on your social media feeds than I've seen out in the wild. How do you obtain those? Where do you tend to get those limited pressings?
You must be talking about the A Stable Sound page.
Yes.
Fanaticism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, doing this for 40 years, knowing the right people, being at the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all those things. You know, I I have to work, so I can't dedicate my life to doing just that. I know some people are fortunate enough to do that. Mm-hmm. And so they have more than I do of that kind of thing. But I feel like, when I get obsessed with something, I really try to go in and exhaust all resources that I can to get those things. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm like, I wish I had more time. I wish I was more aggressive. I wish. Mm-hmm. But then a friend of mine told me something that I just loved. And it kind of made me feel more zen about the whole thing. And he said, the records know who they want to go home with. And so and I believe that, when a record is meant to be with you, it will happen, and I tested that theory out one time with Shadow. We were kind of going through a collection together, and it was like on some drawing sticks thing where it was like blindly, like, this one's yours, next one mine, this one's yours, next one mine, da-da-da-da-da-da. And somehow all the records that I wanted came home with me. All the records that he cared about went home with him. And we didn't even try it. Like, we weren't even going in like that. So mm-hmm. I was like, wow, man, maybe there is something to that prophetic Zen haiku that guy just bestowed on me.
I've got something similar to where I just, I don't have a list of records I'm looking for. But I know the universe is just going to provide something when I go to a record shop or a fair or something like that. And I'm never disappointed. Part of it is I don't know what I missed. So you got to be happy with what you got.
That's a big part. Like, that's a big part of the game. Is like, I don't even want to know what I missed. Because then I'll just be like, damn, what coulda, shoulda, woulda. Mm-hmm. And that's a shitty way to live. So.
But you're taking these white label promos, these very, very collectible records, and you're integrating them into your set. You're working them. You're not putting them on a shelf. You're not being so motherly with them. You're getting them back out doing what they should be doing in the first place.
Yeah, records are meant to be played. They shouldn't just stick on a shelf. But I'm not going to play them too hard. Like the really rare ones, I'm probably going to stay away from putting those into routines. Like, I'm not going to do my one turntable loop pedal routine with like a one of a kind acetate or anything like that. I mean, I hope not.
And if it's a little bit warped, don't try to fix it.
Fuck that. I learned my lesson. I'm scared to death now to do any, I'm going to like, maybe with the new temperatures, I'll probably like go back to doing it with records I don't care about, just to
recalibrate
the equations and the recipe, or if I could just buy one of those dewarpers, which I think they're like 90% effective.
Yeah. There's some of them that are like $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever, so a little bit dear for those. What was the process? Like, you have two pieces of glass, you put the record in there, you clamp it down.
Well, I think that's where I lost. I had a flat like piece of Formica, and then a piece of glass. The glass that I used this time was thicker than the last time, so the heat magnification was a lot more intense. Right. Like, when I touched it, I had to use oven mitts. It was so hot. And I was like, and with the record, I put it in a sleeve, in a protective sleeve. So it's not like the sun is baking directly on the vinyl, because that would be bad, like in 1 second flat. But it would heat it enough and keep the vinyl protected so it wouldn't melt. But, climate change, hello. The vinyl melted no matter what. And so, yeah, here I am.
Now it's something to hang on a wall. Do you fix scratches as well?
I do. Yeah. When I was very young, I found Headhunter, Survival of the Fittest, and it was one of those records I always wanted to find, and we're talking like 1987. Mm-hmm. I was 14, and I remember bringing it home. It was a basement in LA record store hookup. and it skipped on the beat. I was like, of course it skips on the beat. Thank you very much. Joke's on me, everybody. And so I was so angry. Like, what are the odds? Like, on this whole record, there's a skip on the drum break where I absolutely don't want it to be. And so I was so mad. I just took it upon myself to fix it. So I took a sewing needle and trained, the scratch, through the scratch, so it would play through and just pop. And it took I remember it took like an hour. I took a magnifying glass, the sewing needle, and just tried to, get through the. And once I felt it just kind of pop through the scratch, I was like, oh, the needle will probably play through that. And so it did. And I was like, cool. So I just fixed a scratch.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever done it since.
What's with all the records you've gone through and brought home, collected, and what's the weirdest thing you've ever found inside a record?
A condom.
New, I assume.
Yeah. I knew that was coming. But I actually it wasn't a record, it was a cassette. I spent some time obsessed with French cassettes from the early 80s, like post-punk, new wave. Mm-hmm. And in them they would have weird shit, like either they would come with magazines, like that was part of the allure. Like, it wasn't just the cassette or the music, it came with like all this other stuff, postcards, art, yada yada. And so there's this one that's a compilation called Ritual dos Saticos, and it's out of France. And so they would put different things in different copies. And so I remember I got one in the mail, and there was a condom in it. I was like, that's funny. I've heard of weird things like tabs of acid and psychedelic records, trying to think of what else. Obviously, like flyers and press kits and stuff like that is always fun. Other records, the wrong record, in the jacket. That's always fun.
So in terms of your, like the early days when you'd have to go out and, pre-Discogs, obviously, go out and hunt for all these records. As I understand it, you would bring home sometimes hundreds or even thousands of records after big digs. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you know, especially when you're out there in the field, which records are worth taking a chance on?
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
How would you know, especially when you're out there in the field, which records are worth taking a chance on?
Things that looked odd or weird or local, private. If it was major label stuff, it would still be things that I'd never seen. Now, that's not to say that it's rare. It's just that I haven't seen it. So, when I find records on like Epic, like the yellow Epic, mm-hmm. There's a bunch of like to this day, even I'm like, God, I've never seen this one on yellow Epic. What the hell is this? And I'll grab it just cause. Epic seems to be endless of releases of rock records and kind of like soul rock records. It's some of my favorite things on that yellow late 60s Epic. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the deal. Same thing with Atlantic, Cotillion, all the little subsidiary labels of Atlantic. rock records for days, Troika, what the hell's Troika? I guess I got to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from the era where, in the mid 80s, you could go to parking lot sales and buy, 23-cent albums. And so I was right from the start, I was taking massive hauls of these records, taking chances on them, bringing them home, figuring out what parts to sample. So buying in quantity in the early days was always just kind of the way to go. Because you just, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of records in front of me. I should take them because who knows when the next time, will be. And so parking lot sales were huge in California. And of course, they're always in the summer where they're all getting warped outside and there's no cover. And just the smell of melting vinyl, it's almost like, it's kind of intoxicating at this point. It just reminds me of that time when you're outside in the sun and you can smell the records.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, with a little bit of mildew from the sleeves.
Mm-hmm. Well, then there's the basement record smell, which is like the mold, equally as intoxicating especially when you're in a place like, like in the tropics, and you're digging for records. It's just like, oh yeah, I love this. The smell is just like amazing.
So you've dug around the world. Where have the high strike rates been?
Brazil was great in the early 2000s.
What made Brazil great? Was it just the quantity? The quality of the music that they have there, I know is
I think
fantastic.
At that point, yeah, it was just maybe because it was just all new to me. Mm-hmm. So it was, the discovery factor of the music. When I thought of Brazil, I just thought of like, Jobim and Berimbau and Baden Powell and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Astrid Gilberto. I had no idea how vast it was in so many different music genres. So, soul and funk and rap and, as well as samba and tropicalia. I had no idea about any of that stuff, and it was all available.
Yeah.
You could find it in shops and it would be relatively cheap and, on the street.
To me, I imagine it would be the huge trouble is probably the time to go through it. I mean, you could bring back a box of records or go to a yard sale, spend $50 on 100 records. It's really the time to then go through each of them to see if there's any nuggets or gold in there. How did you manage
we had a group of people with us. We had Madlib, we had the Beat Junkies, we had, B+, Egon. So I almost feel like we attacked it on a group level, where it was like, any one of us couldn't do it alone. So as a group, we would spread out and be like, what'd you get? Oh, check this out. And it really helped the situation because I felt like we were all buying together and sharing what we learned.
Okay. But I mean, they're coming back with their own boxes and things. So I guess you'd look for commonalities and, this label seems to have.
We were at the hotel and we would, kind of show and tell. I'd be like, oh shit, I got to try to cop that tomorrow. I got, check this one out. Did you check this one out? Yo, there's a Tony Tornado 45 for Boris Gramazon. Oh, word? Oh shit. I got to find that 45. I found the LP yesterday, So that was a lot of fun.
In the early days, when you'd find a record that had a beat that you wanted to work with, I imagine it was probably then a challenge to find another record so you could do the beat juggling back and forth. Was that an issue, or was there a way of dealing with that?
Well, it depends on how rare it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Brazil, you take something from Brazil and it's got this beat.
Right. So, like, what would be a good example? The SOS band, not the American group. There's a record by an SOS band, and they do a cover of "Hey Last Minute" by the Meters, and it's got a cool little break on it. Yeah, I was like, oh shit, I need to find a double of this. And I don't think I did, but everybody seemed to get a copy. So, I could have. But I don't know, maybe I was just like, I'll just borrow J-Rock's copy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, some things I did buy doubles of. Trying to think of like for instance, the Tony Tornado, I had a 45 and the LP, so I can go back and forth between the two.
And your career started in kind of the infancy of sampling and, of course, litigation using samples. How did you manage in that environment dealing with those newly discovered minefields at the time?
By not putting out records, not having to worry about it because I wasn't selling my music. So it was easy. We were just making demos all the way up until 94. And then even then it was on such an indie level that it didn't really hit the radar of anybody, and we knew it wouldn't until Interscope, which didn't happen until 2000. And in that scenario, obviously it's corporate label, corporate release, so we have to clear those samples, but then you have a budget. And you clear what you can, you try to slide the others through. Sometimes you get pinched, sometimes you don't, you work it out. And I think in 2000 it was tough because some people would not want to work it out in hopes that they could sue a big company like Interscope if they did put it out, right? Like, hey, we want to clear your sample. We used it for a rap song, and me being the sampled artist, let's say, I'd be like, I'm not going to call them back, and hopefully they'll still put it out so I can go after them. Nowadays, I think that there's a lot more. What do you call it when people are working it out together? There's platforms like TrackLib, right? To where you can use this third-party system to sample things easily in their catalog that they control for those purposes, but still represent the artists that the music belongs to. So if you can't find the artist, or if you don't want to deal with the artist, you can deal with this third-party platform. And I think that that's incredible, that service is available. You still pay. It's like, and then the other thing is like, the quotes aren't going to be all over the place. It's like, this is, if you're going to use this much, you pay this much. It's all set. So we were waiting for that. Like back in the day, we were like, why doesn't this system exist? And I was just like, because the lawyers won't make money, man. It's all conspiracy. It's the big deep state, bro. Now that's kind of not the issue anymore, because you can go about it this way. And they don't represent everybody. Of course, you're going to have to, if you want to sample something completely obscure, you do have to do the legwork to find them. But people like TrackLib, their catalog grows daily, so they are getting more and more obscure and representing more artists, which is amazing. And other people do it too. Like Egon from Now Again represents he's an incredible digger. Like we came up together, digging through records, and he then created a company called Now Again after he worked with Stone's Throw, and he represents a lot of artists in the same way and does deals to where he licensed stuff for them. He's in direct contact. So if I want to sample, say for instance, my Moonlightin' with Biz song samples Moonlight by Apple and the Three Oranges. It's a very at one time obscure 45 from LA, and he ended up reissuing their music and representing the catalog. So it was very easy for me to just hit Egon and be like, hey man, I sampled this, what quote can you get me? And it was super simple, totally reasonable, and it was done in an hour. So there was a big taboo about samples, and like, you got to deal with these people that haven't done music in years, and they think that this is going to be their big payday, and all that seems to kind of be washed away now.
So the process for making an album like Die Cut, how does that start to come together? Do you start with the beats? Do you start with the skeleton, the structure, and then research like what can be licensed off there? Like what's the process of doing something like that?
We'll be back after these messages.
Psst. Well, hey everyone, it's Nate here. Rather than running our sponsor ads again, can I give a plug for our Patreon page here? Patreon.com/Vinyl Guide, where right now there is an extended interview and it's totally commercial free. And quite frankly, I'm sure you all know podcasts only really exist because of the support of the audience. And that's what I'm here to ask you for. Please consider supporting the show, $5 or $10 a month, whatever you can afford. Because if you're listening to this now, some into the episode, that's great. You're enjoying it. I'm glad you're enjoying it. For that, I would ask you to please consider supporting the show. Patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. It's super important. It's like a direct lifeline to us here, and it's a huge signal, and the support is so welcome and helps keep this podcast going. Each week I put extra stuff up there, extended interviews, and it's all ad-free, and it's early, and it's all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you politely, please support the Vinyl Guide, patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. All right, that's it. Back to the show.
No limits.
The process for making an album like Die Cut, like how does that start to come together? Do you start with the beats? Do you start with the skeleton, the structure, and then research like what can be licensed off there? Like what's the process of doing something like that?
Die Cut was done in a unique way. I retroactively cleared the samples before I made the music, for the most part. So there was a large catalog of, I guess what I'm about to tell you is I became a track lib or an Egon in this scenario. I found a catalog of music, this French early 80s kind of post-punk, drum machine, new wave. I don't even know how you describe it. I just fell in love with it, and I wanted to make music out of it. But I also wanted to share it with the world because I didn't want people to think that I created this music. Like, oh, this is Cut Chemist. No, I wanted people to realize that there's a source that I'm sampling. I don't think it would be fair to the artist if I tried to take credit for their work, even if I did clear it. So I approached them, and this is in the MySpace days. I hit them up on MySpace, Vox Populi, and I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. I would love to hear more. I would love to get product. I just want to like school me on your shit. And this Axel, the main guy in the band, hit me back, and he was like, yo, totally. I'm excited to share my music with you. He sent me CDs in the mail. He sent me original cassettes, hence the condom. and I started to put together a comp of their music at the same time, sampling it and making music for Die Cut. And so I put out a comp of their music along with their partner group, Pacific 231, also French. And I called it Funk Off. So if anybody out there wants to check it out, it's Cut Chemist presents Funk Off by Vox Populi and Pacific 231. And so in that deal of doing a reissue compilation of their material, I also bundled in a clause that allowed me to make new compositions for a set, rate of publishing and stuff. So, we all worked it out to where it was like, they knew I was going to make music out of it on the heels of the comp. And so we worked out what they should get depending on how much of the music I took. Or if there was a third party involved, like a vocalist, then we would split it up 3 ways. If it was just me and them, then we would do 50-50. It was all equal splits. Mm-hmm. And so it was cool to approach an album like that, because I didn't have to worry as I was making music, is this going to clear? Is this not going to clear? Which, hinders the artistic process, the creative process as you're doing it, because you're not sure if it's going to be able to exist this way. as you're making it, you're like, I don't know, so it's kind of hard to create freely when you have that in the back of your mind. And I didn't, because I knew that this had already been, the deal was already done. So it was quite freeing to approach making die cut like that. Not everything comes from their material, of course. I mean, like I said, the Moonlight thing came from Egon. That deal. There was one. Okay, so there was one where I approached a guy, and I don't know what happened, but I think I approached the wrong guy in the band or something. And I wanted to clear a sample. This is for I Got a Weapon. And it was like Belgian, like some Belgian 45. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get a call back. And so I just took a chance. And I put it out anyway. And the day it came out, the guy hits me up. He's like, yo, what's up? You used my shit. And it was a different dude. And I was like, yo, man, I tried to hit you guys up, but I didn't get a call back. So I figured, but he was like, yeah, that guy, he doesn't control the stuff. It's me. And I'm like, oh, well, what do you want to do? I'm down to work it out. And he was cool. He was like, yeah. I was basically like, what do you suggest? I'm open to whatever you think is fair for sampling and stuff. Just so you know, I did try to contact you, and he was like, yeah, it's all good. So we came up with a number, and it was fine, but that was funny. Like, it was, I almost feel like, yeah, I mean, it was just weird. He like, it was really like the day or the week that it dropped, that he hit me up with like a little, what was it, like a YouTube link? And he's like, what's up with this? Oh. I was like, I'm so glad you contacted me, because I want to, give you what is right.
Want to make yours. It right. Well, look, I want to refer everyone who's listening over to the Bandcamp site, cutchemist.bandcamp.com. There's a subscription, $15 a month, and there's a bit of a teaser video there. Check it out, and this is a fantastic deal. Because just the amount of music that's there behind this subscription. I just put it on and I listen to it, and sometimes I get absorbed into the videos, but it's a great way to increase the quality of your day of having this music behind you in whatever you do on the computer. So cutchemist.bandcamp.com, and there's a subscription.
Yeah, I do. I want to add to that, and I think everything you've just said is amazing, and I appreciate it. I would look at the subscription page like a record pool. You have the Beat Junkies record pool, which I'm subscribed to, and it is a huge service. Like, I used to belong to a record pool when it was just vinyl, and that's how you would DJ the club, because you get the latest releases, service to you. Beat Junkies, same thing. You get these weird, mashups. They have, things in different sections, like electronic. You can type in a tempo search, genre and tempo. You can narrow it down. Like, I want something, 100 BPMs, club, moombahton, whatever. Like, I can't sell people enough on the Beat Junkies record pool. My record pool is a little bit different. My record pool is like, oh, you want that rare acetate that no one else has, You want the shit that I like, like that I, from the 80s and 90s that I think is important, like historically in hip hop. It's a different direction, and not anything available on any of the DSPs, obviously. So that's kind of what sets my service apart from something like a Beat Junkies thing. This is more for the things that you didn't know existed. Well, they do. I have them, and I can prove it. Here you go. And you can own them and download them. So that's kind of my main mission. It's almost like digitizing the rare part of my collection and sharing it with people.
Speaking of your collection, do you have an approximate number of records that you have? LPs?
I don't know. I've been
45s?
saying 30,000 for like 15 years. So, well,
I've seen it. It looks a lot bigger.
Let's just say that's what you said. So we could still say 30,000, but maybe 35, 40, maybe I'm up to 40. But, over the pandemic, I sold a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
I was selling a lot of records. I definitely got rid of thousands. So maybe I'm back down, to 30. Who knows?
When you sell a record, do you have something that goes with it? A bit of provenance that this came from your collection?
Yeah, you'll get like a rare litmus test postcard and a sticker from like 2005, or, one of the things I offer is like autographed garden singles, not even just autographed, but like one of a kind, like artwork. Like I'll do a painting on the cover.
Oh.
And sell it, for like $50 or, depending on how much went into the painting. Right. I'm doing a series right now and it's taken me a long time, like really, really nice paintings, Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking I'll probably let those go for like 100 or something a piece.
And where can people find those?
Well, probably on Bandcamp. A lot of the sales I did were through Bandcamp. Sometimes I would do them on Instagram. Like I would kind of go back and forth. Instagram is completely DIY private, no commission. It's direct from me to the fans. There's no third party. And for the delivery method, sometimes if it's local, I would drive it over to you. So I would actually, come to your spot and hand it to you. It was one of the pandemic perks, taking advantage of the non-traffic issue during the pandemic. I mean, I can get to Long Beach in 25 minutes, which, that's never going to happen again in my life. No. Even when there's another pandemic, that's never going to be the case. So I was taking advantage of delivering records in that scenario locally. And it was a lot of fun. You'd hang out with these people, talk, about music, about what, it was kind of like fan shit. And there was one kid I delivered to, where was he? I think he was out in Long Beach. And he ordered a poster and a cassette. And we were talking about, he was like a huge mixtape cassette collector from the 90s. And he was like, yo, I even got your Sick Experiment tape. And I was like, oh, word? I don't even have that. He was like, I have two. You want to borrow one? I was like, I'd love to, because I would love to upload it into the subscription series. So he totally let me like borrow my first mixtape I ever put out from like 95. It was awesome, and I mailed it back to him. But it's like little things like that where, it's just, people are just super generous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of generous, Cut, you've been generous with your time here. Thank you so much for coming on the Vinyl Guide and talking with us and sharing all those stories, the background, some of the details, some of the harrowing moments. You've had this whole life around records, this life and career. And it's, again, I so enjoy the output that you do, the music, the videos, even watching your live sets on YouTube. I want to recommend folks check out cutchemist.bandcamp.com. I think you could follow folks up on Bandcamp, so wherever that follow button is, click it. Check out his subscription. It really is killer. Again, there's a teaser video up there. You can get a bit of a taste, and of course, he's just shared a little bit more about some of the background on it.
And the site. You should check out the website I offer if you're in town. If anybody's in town, I offer a candlelight set at my studio where I play vintage rare vinyl by candlelight.
That's a StableSound.com.
In a sound bath speaker scenario. So like you're surrounded by speakers. It's fantastic.
Yes. All the more reason to that condom was in that cassette tape.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So that's cutchemist.com if you want to check that out. And yeah, man, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Man, I could just talk to that dude all day. Mr. Cut Chemist, ladies and gentlemen, we only scratched the surface too. This guy goes deep, and he's got a huge history. Make sure you give him a Google. Check him out at cutchemist.com, as well as his subscription at cutchemist.bandcamp.com. That subscription's called A Stable Sound Club. It's $15 a month US. It's very amazing, very cool, very worthwhile. And also, don't forget, we've got an extended version of this interview available only to patrons of the show at patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Meet us up there and check it out. And that's it for this episode of the Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share these episodes on your social media. Put them out on Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter, do us a TikTok dance, whatever you got to do. That is always appreciated. Also, leave us a positive review on Apple iTunes or wherever you get these podcasts. 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 stars. We love it when you guys say something nice about us and try to make us blush. That is always appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.